Right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Um, it's nice to see everyone this evening. Thank you very much for your time. I'd like to welcome everyone who's here this evening to the Royal Ocean Racing Club 2025 Winning Features and Tools webinar presented by Predict Wind and sponsored by Predict Wind. My name is Lisa MacDonald, and I just wanted to reflect on celebrating 100 years of ocean racing and how I'm reminded of how far we've come with technology and in regards to navigation, weather forecasts, communications, and finding that optimal or the best course to win the race. So on that note, I'm very proud to present our Predict Win team this evening, Nick Olsen and Craig Smith out of New Zealand, who will show us around the latest and greatest features and tools to use on your track record to success. And on that note, thanks very much for your time again, and I'll pass over to Nick Olsen.
Thanks, Lisa. So I will share my screen and we'll jump straight into it. So we'll start at the beginning, and how you can access the things that we offer is there's two main ways. We have the Predict Wind app, which is what you can use when you're at home, just going day sailing, for a race for the afternoon, or just checking out conditions or planning races. Or even return trips from wherever you are. So it's built for, when you're on cell or a high-speed internet connection. So you can use that with your Starlink, and some of the time you will. And if you've got good cell coverage. So you can do everything from weather routing to, checking out all the models, setting up polars, all that sort of thing, all in the Predict Wind app. And that is the same as what we will be using today, I'll be using, which is the Predict Wind website. So the other side of it, which Smiley will show you a bit of, oh, sorry, Craig's name's Smiley, is the Offshore App. That's, again, if I thought I was going out of cell coverage, I would use the Offshore App. It saves all your routes offline, all your gribs, so you can have that there to look at any time. Even if I know I'm mostly going to be in cell coverage, I will use, or even patchy cell coverage, I'll use the Offshore App, download everything before I go on a race, and have that there with me to refer to at any time. So if you have more questions about those apps and how you use them, definitely reach out to our support team. So first of all, I'm going to talk about models, and then I'll talk about maps and a few other things along the way. Global models, we do 6 global models. So with global, obviously they cover the whole globe. Generally, global models are a coarser resolution. You probably recognize the names of some of them. ECMWF, SPY, UKMO, GFS, and then our proprietary PWE and PWG models. ECMWF is the number one global weather model, high resolution really for a global model, 9 kilometers, and it also has very good wave modeling. All of the studies rate it very highly. It's pretty good short term, pretty good with your local stuff, and it does well longer term. And when I say longer term, I mean 3 to 5, 6 days. And I would say that's sort of the longest we would, consistently look at a model. And I'll sort of explain that a bit more about that as we go. But we're always updating our forecast, so we're not relying on what we saw on day 1 for day 6. So anyway, I won't dwell too long on that sort of stuff. We have Spire, which is from a private weather company, does well offshore. Got a unique way that they run that model, and that they get the data for that with their own nano satellite network. UKMO, you're probably familiar with the UK Met Office, and so we have the high-res version of that as well. The GFS from America, sort of the old trusty workhorse that you see everywhere because it's free. Thanks for that at this stage, America. And then our models, and their strength is really in the high resolution short term. Their strength is not the longer term stuff. And the difference, they're the same model. The difference between them is the initial conditions that go into them. So one of them has the NOAA initial conditions and the other one has the ECMWF initial conditions. But from there, they are a full model run. They are not a derivative of the ECMWF or the GFS. They are separate models. I mentioned high resolution. I think for a lot of your short term, well, you know, and when I say short term, I'm talking up to 36 hours. These models are going to do a better job than the global models. Obviously, the HRRR and the NAM are not applicable in Europe, but the Rome is that you may be familiar with is a really good weather model. Scores really well when it's validated, and you know, is down to 1.25 kilometers resolution. So, and updates quite often. So you can see the update frequency there down the bottom. UKMO 2K, again, a nice high res model, does pretty well. Our PWG and PWE 1K models, I actually love these models. Here in summer in Auckland, you pretty much can't beat the PWG. Spend a lot of time out on the water, and for that on the day or next day stuff, where you're getting that high resolution modeling, so that runs out to 36 hours, does a really, really good job. And especially around that thermal activity, I really, really rate that model myself. But when you're somewhere, a particular location, you'll get a feel for which models do well or not. On that point, we do have, if I find the right screen, we do have a validation tool. It is just in our main menu. So any location you have, so you see here I have all my locations set, you know, mostly here in New Zealand. I've got one in Weymouth because I'm taking my son there in July, and I have cows set. Anyhow, I can look at any of these locations and it will have these numbers here, this mean, average, error, which is a way of measuring how wrong they are. And you'll see at the moment that the Spire model is actually doing really well for wind speed. And I'm looking at the one day. So for the last 7 days, that one day, that day of and next day, this is how it's measuring. It's measuring the accuracy. And you'll see there for direction at the moment for this location, the aroma is doing well. These will change quite often, but it is a nice way if you're wondering about models to see what's actually doing well at the moment. And if I change my location to, say, Weymouth, and we're using a different location to measure off, and you'll see that the results change slightly. It's interesting to see the Spire doing so well. And so if you see on the map here, if I zoom in on this map, you can see where the station that it's actually measuring from. So it's always good to know. Okay, so we do have a lot of information about models in our help center. So if you update times and things like that, update times are in the app. So you see for Weymouth, it has the local times that the models are updating. Knowing when the model's updated is really, really important, because then you can have the latest forecast and, you know, get the newest information. You know, if you're doing a coastal race and you know that the PWG updates at, you know, at 5:30 in the morning or at 10 to 6 at night, and then you get that model straight away and it's got some new information in there that you weren't aware of before, you know, you could make some really great tactical decisions with that. In Predict Wind, you know, we're here on our maps, and I can look at my wind maps and I can click on this weather model here. It tells me that I'm looking at the PWG 1 kilometer. And I have all these options here to choose different parameters, and I can select all the weather models and see what they run through each one of them. You'll see the resolution changes when I change the models, because that's whatever its default resolution is at this zoom level. If I zoom out, I'll get a coarser resolution. And I can also change my display here. I can put feathers on or arrows. When you go to these views, if I zoom out, we get our isobar lines. So now I'll zoom back in, and you'll see as I zoom back in, my resolution changes over here. So that's a thing to know. We do have some lightning features. GMDSS, this is really good for understanding what situation is around, and knowing what's going on. You might see some of that when Smiley talks about weather routing, but the GMDSS is written by the local Met service and will give you any warnings. As you can see, there's nothing around the UK and France at the moment. Going back to maps. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can look at this information. A lot of people like looking at forecast tables and seeing what's going on, and you can see the differences between the models. I like tables. There's probably my first place to go and have a look. I think we probably need to be acutely aware that everything that we look at when we're looking at these things, these parameters, is that they're location based. So if I go from Weymouth to Cowes, you'll see my forecast will change, because it's for that very spot that we put our location in on the map. So you need to know that. So with all the models, looking at trends is a really nice thing to do. If you're doing short races, or any races, knowing what these trends are is really important. Whichever model's more accurate than the other and all that sort of thing, people can, talk about that. But really what we want to know about is trends. For example, I know that from here to here that we've got a building breeze. It might build to 8 knots, it might build to 6, but either way, we're building, and then we're pretty steady throughout. And yes, we might get some variation between the models, and we might this one might end up being right, but we do have that trend there throughout the day. And the same with the direction. For on a race course, is the trend for the day left or right, or does it change throughout the day? Super important to know what that trend is going to be, and you can see it's pretty very consistent throughout the models here. What happens direction wise? Yeah, observations are really important to your strategy and your sailing, and knowing what's going on. And we can look at these. I mean, it's obviously particularly light at the moment, so it's a very difficult situation. But looking at the observations and comparing your model to what the observations are can be a really nice way of validating what's going on, and also tactically knowing that there's been a shift or whatever. You can even set up forecast observation alerts, and so if there was a front coming through, you could be alerted that it's happened 50 miles up the coast before you see it. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is tidal currents. We've done a lot of tidal current modeling in the last few years, and we've done 100-meter resolution modeling. It's very cool, and does a really nice job. I mean, knowing how the current actually looks and how it's changing is pretty important. If I just scroll this through on the timeline a little bit, this is the part that really fascinates me, is when we get on the turn, as to what's going on, because you can make some massive gains if you know what's going on in the turn of the tide, or even when it's at full flow. But being able to view this at 100-meter resolution is pretty awesome, and can make some massive differences to your strategy and your tactics. Our router will use it, our weather router, and so it's calculated in your route. But I still think that for very short races, course racing, knowing what that trend is, can really help. I did a regatta with my daughter on the weekend. First race of the regatta, I knew that the tide had turned on the shore, and that was the overriding factor for our tactics for the first beat of the race, and we were, in the top three at the top mark, just because I knew that tide had turned, and so therefore it was actually back eddying already along the coast, and so that was the overriding factor for our strategy. So just to see where all of this stuff is, we do have a coverage map, and you can look at the coverage map for the weather models, like where you can turn on all the different models to see where they all are and what coverage we have for each model. And so we're looking at the wind model here, and then if I come down here, and it knows where I am, so it geolocates me. But if I come in here and have a look at this coverage, I can see where we have the 100 meters, the IBI currents, which we use a lot around this area, and 400 meter and 4K tidal currents. We also have ocean current modeling, and that all factors in with your weather routing. So anyway, I think that's all I need to talk about for now, and I will stop sharing and hand over to Smiley and turn my camera off for a bit.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, team. I'll jump straight into sharing a screen, and we'll get straight into this weather routing. So hopefully you can all see that screen there. So we have this great, I guess, weather routing feature. The first thing that you want to be doing is setting up your polars. So that's really important. So that's the performance characteristics of your vessel. So I'm on the forecast website. So initially you want to set up your polars here. You want to run some weather routing on the forecast website. Some people use this forecast website offshore with Starlink. I prefer to use the Offshore App offshore, but I'll do all my initial planning and all my certainly my polars at the front end here. Okay, so I'm on sail routing, weather routing, sail routing here, and I'm going to go into routing preferences. So we predict when we have a whole bunch of predefined polars, and I suggest you start with a predefined polar. So we have a great big long list here. I've got boat type, predefined. I'm feeling fast this morning with one coffee. I've got a Volvo 70 as my predefined polar, but we've got a whole bunch of them, right? So you can, at first glance, I would just choose a vessel on here, which if it's not, your boat's not on the list, I would use a similar vessel. I'll get you going, okay? Because you can always use what we call this polar speed adjustment against those polars to refine them to your boat's performance. As you get a little bit more confident, you're sailing your boat, doing all those things, you can actually copy this predefined polar across to advanced polars. And then I've got a table which I can edit. Okay, and you can see the boat polar curve over here. But let's stick with predefined. I should say here with advanced, if you're using Adrena or Expedition, you can import your polars. Okay, so the advanced polars has an import and export feature. So if you've got a set of polars you've developed, you can export them, you can save them, so you don't lose them on file. Okay. The other option here, I wouldn't suggest using sail. You should be better than that. It should be predefined, advanced, or AI polars. The AI polar is polars generated if you have a predict wind data hub, which is essentially pulling all your NMEA data. It's taking all that data set and it's chucking it back on our servers, and it's updating your polars in real time. Fantastic feature. But here, let's stick with the predefined. I've got a Volvo 70. I'm clearly not motoring. Maybe on the return delivery, we want to do that for the delivery team. I've got my polar speed adjustment set at 100, and I've got some other parameters here. Clearly, I'm doing fastest time because I'm racing. If I roll down here, I have my wave polar. So what we've done here is we've taken all vessels, waterline length, canoe draft, displacement, beam, and we've done some modeling. So how your boat performs in a wave set. It's a really cool metric. So have this on. You can always adjust these numbers. Okay. Now, underlying of all our routing, we have C-maps. So you don't, as for the depth contours, you don't actually see it, but basically the router is using those depth contours. So for me, 2 or 5 meters, because I'm not using it as a navigational tool as such. Tidal and ocean currents, I would have that selected, and we have a number of models that we can choose from. Mercator, on average, I find does the better job, but you know, you can dig into that detail, but certainly start there. Now, further down this page, I've got advanced routing adjustments. So that's really, as it suggests, quite advanced. If you say on a, you know, transatlantic, where you're getting maybe all the models are out sort of 10, 15 degrees for what you're seeing on board, you can actually skew the data set. So the routing is outputs to what you're actually seeing on board. You would do that as a one-off hit. You would always review that at every model run. Now, with those models that Nick's talking about, is that you want to be doing at least updating the weather routing twice a day when the models roll in, and you want to have that jotted down on the nav station, because that's really important. When you've set your polars up, you want to be then just running some sail routing. You don't actually have to do a long route like this transatlantic that I've got going. Just pick a short route, run a route, and have a look at the routing output. So I'm going to run that route. So just come across here and it's calculate the route. So what's happening here, we're using all the high resolution data that we have. So unlike other routing software where it's not done in the cloud and you have to bring in like 120 megabytes of grids to get a route, what we're doing here is using the cloud, using the high resolution tidal, we're using the ocean current, we're using all your polars, we're using the high resolution model, so the PWE 1 kilometer, then the 8K, then the 50, and at the back end of that, the reverse of that. So the data set around this weather routing, it comes in for about 25 KB, but you're using all that high resolution stuff. So here I've got a route which has come in, and as Nick was saying before, I've got the GMDSS turned on. Now, why I do like the GMDS, it's a great feature. The whole world's broken up into met areas, and we're taking that data set, and with AI, we're just putting that onto the map, because GRIBs are not noted by a meteorologist. That's just not possible. It's computer generated, but this gives you a very good heads up of where the systems are. It's really important to have a good general overview of the play. So I want to know where the highs, where the lows are. As you can see here, there's a low here. We've got another low here. We've got a lot of activity here. I can turn that off, so it cleans up my screen. Now what I'll be doing here is I can play this forward. I can play the routing forward, and my boat, because I'm using the PWG route with the models, it's playing on that PWG route, but I'm also getting those other lines of the other models. But to this point here, which is probably a day away, there's some real consensus with the models, and then we have some disparity here. But I'm not too concerned about that, because I'm always looking at the detail here. This is really good, and you would use this. You'll be looking at the weather routing probably 3 or 4 days out from a start, you know, like for coastal racing, transatlantics, all that sort of thing. You can use it wherever you like, but you'll be looking, say, 3 days out. You'll be having a look at the weather routing, because you're getting all the data set, as Nick was saying, starts sort of now and rolls out 10 days. So there's really no point running the weather routing, you know, 10 days out from the start. But this helps you develop a playbook for the team. You know, you go, well, guys, we can see the first 12 hours is really uncomfortable. You know, we've got to prepare the boat accordingly, all those sort of things, sail changes. So how am I seeing that data set to give me this sort of, I guess, this finer detail? So it's great looking at the map, get the general overview, but I'm straight into tables, okay? So the table data set in graphs, consider this an executive summary of this whole route, right? So like I said, it's taking all the finer detail, high resolution, and then it's rolling into the coarser resolution model. So here we have got the wind speed and how it's trending. I've got true wind direction. I've got true wind angle. I've got rain. Why is that important? Well, rain was associated with some cape. There could be some thunderous activity. So that's a micro event because all these gribs, they won't show thunderous activity. So it's really important for heads up on this stuff here. Obviously got temperature. We've got barometer. We've got wave height. Okay. And I'm in meters. You can change this to feet. I've got wave direction. I've got wave period. And all this data set, you know, when you're looking at just, if you just downloaded, say, ECMWF wave grid, you just can't see this data set. Like it's very hard to pick up, especially when I get down here. So I've got some current direction and speed. But here's the big deal for me. We have these metrics. And as I spoke about before, we have, you know, how your wave polar, how your boat performs in the waves. And we're not talking about just one wave, it's a combined. So we've got the primary, secondary, tertiary swell, and then we have the wind wave and how your boat performs in that. So what I'm seeing here at a glance, and this is brilliant, right? As I'm seeing anything over 4, it could be quite difficult, you know. I'm starting here on the 17th, I've got some real elevation. So this could be how we manage the boat. You know, if we've got periods of time where we have to pull off a jibe, maybe this is the area here that we're concerned about. So giving the team a heads up. Same with the vertical acceleration, the elevation is greater than 0.2 here. So that's sort of concern. And then we've got this slamming. So what this is suggesting at some point in time on the 19th, I've got potentially some upwind, right? So across from here, I've got wind. You always want to validate your polars because I'm moving around on boats. I can see I'm Volvo 70. I've got my polar speed adjustment. I don't have any scale factors. I'm using the Mercator ocean current model. I'm not motoring. Well, I might be in this case. So here we go. Start time, finish time taken. So a bit of a summary. And then I've got all the models. So I've got the PWG model here and its data set. I've got true wind speed, gust, true wind direction, true wind angle, course over ground, speed over ground. For points on that route all the way through. What we've also done to make it easy, because the routings can be a winning tool for you, but it's also a safety tool. Like it's really important that, you know, we've got to get the boat there, we've got to get the people there. So we've got these warnings out the side. So this is no big deal. This is just wind chill. But where the roll comes in, this will be another warning. Okay, there's gust and wind chill. So it's all good stuff. Now I've got all the models here. So if you're mid-ocean and you're deciding which model to choose, you don't have model bias. I would be saying, well, which model what am I seeing on my onboard? You know, how is the model aligning to my onboard conditions? How is it aligning to my barometer? You know, does a true wind direction and true wind speed, is that what I'm seeing, right? So I've got the wind stuff here, and this can help me with that playbook I'm talking about too. There could be a period here, just say the PWE is doing the best job. I can see here that the breeze is going aft, right? So I can see that's at night time. It could be that I get the bowman to run the outboard sheeting prior to dark, so that's already led. It could be, you know, the next sail up. We know when that sail change is coming, and maybe we can time some of the stuff at a watch change or not. But basically, we can see here that we're at, you know, on starboard 54, so we're sort of just slightly cracked on the wind stuff, but we're getting deeper and deeper. We're getting into sort of some downwind angles, and then we're actually got to pull off a jibe. Now, if this jibe here was at a point in time where that roll number was high, so if at the right here, I was seeing a roll index out here, which I was concerned about, over 4, then we probably need to have we should always be doing maneuvers with the right people in the right spots. But if it's big breeze, if the waves are, we've seen that roll number with all those sort of that metric high, then we definitely need to make sure we've got the right people in the right spot. So that's that playbook where it's the same driver taking it through the jibe. It's the same guy in the main sheet. It's the same guy in the pit. Same guy in the pumps. All those sort of things. So we can manage that. Okay, looking after the people in the boat. So that's how we would use that. There's a summary there. So that's just pretty much the same sort of stuff. And I would be talking to the crew prior to the event. We know we're starting on a Saturday, of course, but by the Thursday, we want to be talking about, hey, we're going to see this is going to be a tough race. We've got some, it's majority upwind. We've got max wind speed, over 30 knots. It's gusting 35, 40, whatever it might be. So we want to sort of dig in and communicate this so people can sort of feel the race before they start as such. So we've got the summary. We've got waypoints. Not fully suggesting you pick a waypoint, but certainly we have that data set here. If you're not into graphs like I am, you can come into here and you can look at the combined wind, wave, and swell, and all those others. So wind, wave, primary, secondary, tertiary, and then there's that roll number I'm talking about. So here we've got that's just wind chill. Current data. And then I like this one here because this gives me you should be in tune with your barometer. It's really important, but here's giving me that number all the way through for all the different models. And I can see there's no cape and there's no rain, but like I say, that thunderous activity, really important. Races are won and lost on that. Have a good understanding of cloud development and whether a cloud is actually a sucking cloud or downdraft. I've seen boats get caught out before in the Volvo race. Going up to Miami, boats probably 2 nautical miles away and get caught under a cloud, and they last by a long way. So really important. The other thing which we're bringing in here, which is quite cool, is we're going to be bringing in your sail charts. So you'll be able to have on the routing at any point in time, it'll give you some heads up. So maybe you're on you're on an A4, and then it's going to tell you that you're going to be on sort of maybe a masthead 0 in 4 hours time, and you can have those combinations. Or you're on the J4, and then the breeze is lightning, so you're on the J3, 2 reefs, then 1 reef, full main, that sort of thing. It'll show that on these results. So that's something that's coming pretty soon. It's pretty cool. So this is the forecast website, and as Nick was saying, it's the Predict Wind app is exactly the same as this in a sense, but what we probably want to have a look at is the Offshore app. So what I'll do is I'll stop sharing and I'll come back in and we will then get into the Offshore app. Or not. Oh, that's pretty bad, Nick. I've actually lost that whole screen where I can share now. Where's that gone?
Your share button.
Yeah, it's gone.
It'll be there. At the bottom of the screen.
I can't see it. That's bad. No, she's definitely gone. I can't. Hang on. Here we go. It's gone out the back here.
Just for anyone that's never done a webinar, finding your Zoom controls are always fun to deal with.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's ridiculous. So you can see that, right?
Nope.
You can
Yep.
see.
There you are.
Yep. Righto, I'm in here. Sorry, I apologise for that. That's ridiculous. So I'm in our offshore app. So this is very
Just
much
need to go full screen though.
right.
Yep.
Happy there. Right. Right. So I'm in our offshore app. Right? And this is very menu based. It's like going to the restaurant, choosing what you want. So what I've done here is I've actually run a route. But what I would do here is we're offshore, or we're using this prior to going, right? Or doing the coastal race, and it's all menu driven. So I would go download, and then I would change my download method. If I was on Iridium Go or an exec, I would clearly not choose the web connection. I would do Go or exec, but because we're on high-speed internet or on Starlink right now, we would use the web. I could then choose the grids that I want to bring in, right? So I'm picking these guys here, PWG, PWE, ECMWF, GFS, and I'm doing the NAM model. Why am I doing that? Is because the front end of the GFS route is actually the NAM data set. So it's the high resolution. So what we've done, we've taken a decision of saying, well, the first 36 hours, we will use the high resolution data where it's available. Okay, so you're getting the best data set, and that's the same with the roam. So if you are looking at the ECMWF route in Europe, it'll be using the roam front end, and with the UKMO, it'll be using the 2-kilometer resolution, not the 15. Okay, so I always bring in wind and pressure, and the other parameters I don't tend to bring in because I want to keep that file size down. Now, I'm bringing in high resolution. You can see that's 121 megabytes. That's a massive file. So you're not going to bring that on an exec. You're not going to bring it on a Go or an Iridium 9555 with a optimizer. It's impossible. So you wouldn't bring that in. You'd bring in 100K resolution, right? And you'd jump off some more parameters and get that down to sort of 150 for a Go, 500 for an exec. So I've already bought in the high resolution stuff. We're with the routing now. We want to do this now, of course, because we're offshore. It's always now from our new position. I've got the next. I'm not going to bring in the ocean current data because the weather routing's using that already anyway. So I don't really need to see that. That doesn't change too much. I'm going to bring in AIS data. Why I want to bring that in? Because it's from my start position. It's bringing in all the AIS targets around me with a 300 nautical mile radius of me. And where you guys have the YB tracker, I think that's something that you have, then you will be bringing in YB events, and it's the same thing. You'll be able to see other vessels in the offshore app. Okay, so I'd be next, and I would download this. So this is a massive file. So I'm not going to download that. I'm going to have a look at my output here. Now, as Nick was saying, we've got high resolution. So we will have a look at these areas. So you can see the little boxes here. This is high resolution. And these bigger boxes, this will be the 8K. And if I go back to weather routing and play this forward, you'll see how this jumps. So you can see that's high res there. That's that I'm looking at the PWG model. And now it'll be rolling into another 8K zone, and then another one. And as I roll across, you can see that now it's gone into a 50 kilometer zone. We can change this data set. If we brought it in, I can change any of these parameters here. If I put the AIS on, you can see all these targets here. So back at my green, I can see that, my competition. I can see that there's a shipping lane. I can see there's fishing fleets, which I might want to avoid. So it's a real good safety feature. That the other thing, if you have a data hub on board, the great thing about a data hub, you can actually be you can see this, what we call over the horizon on your chart plotter, similar to this, out to 300 nautical miles. But what you are is actually a base station, so it's going the other way. So where you've got a class, you have a class B transponder, not getting picked up by satellites, then you being a base station is another safety factor to actually put the boats around you in VHF range back to the aggregators. So that's quite a cool feature. But what we'll be doing is be running the routing. Oh, there we go. We've got a boat there. That's a ship. We'll be running the routing from our new position. So up here, we're saying this is 12 hours later. I'd be running my new routing from here, and I'd be recasting it. Clearly, we've got something going on here. We've got a split. Now, that could be a split with current. There's something to do with the wind models, I assume. So this is of interest, but we're not too concerned about that because we're not there. And running the new routing from here offshore will give us a different route anyway. So we're always concerned about this first part, but we always want to be looking at the bigger picture, right? So at all times, it's important that you have the GMDSS, which is I've got that on, and I don't think I've downloaded it. But you'll have the GMDSS. So what we'll show, because looking at it right now, I can't see any, because I've got high res on, I can't see any weather maps. The GMDSS will have a potential low out here, a low here, a high down here, whatever it might be. So I always need to know that general play. Okay, so when you get into the back end of a route, so we've crossed the Atlantic, we're coming in through here. As Nick was saying before, you want to be really digging into the high resolution data set, right? And you can get that in tables. You don't have to be downloading the high resolution grids to see that data set. So once again, it's into here. And what I'd be doing is favoring the PWG or the PWE. I'll be model bias at this time with those two models, and probably going into cows there, I'll be really looking at the UKMO model. That's what I'll be having a look at. So the look and feel of this is pretty much the same. It's the same output. So don't get too concerned with the Offshore App. Just put your credentials in and run it. The beauty of it, it's all saved in an offline mode. So you can just, you can lie in your bunk and review it. You don't actually have to be stuck in a nav station looking at this data set. And, that's important for you guys who do two-handed racing. You can spend more time getting the best performance out of the vessel than someone down there just trying to download gribs. It's like a set of books doing a profit and loss back in the day. You don't want to get a whole dump of bank statements on your desk. You'd rather have an executive summary of where you sit. It's exactly with this. This is giving you a summary, of that route, and totally heads up for that next 12 hours. That's what I'd be really looking at. Have I missed anything, Nick? It's be almost.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking a little bit about sort of around the coast of the UK there.
Yep.
About how those currents work and how that modeling works. I've actually got a route I can show if you want.
Yeah, I'll hand over back to you. Here we go. Stop sharing.
So just like Smiley was just then, I'm in the Offshore App, and I've gone and downloaded a bunch of gribs and my routes. I think my polar is a dealer 42, and you can see I've come out of here and it really wants to hug the coastline, and I've got the a Rome weather model set up there. And so my routing's, obviously it looks pretty simple here that we want to doing a nice job. It's actually the ECMWF route here that we're looking at with the arome. They mix together in that first period of your route. It'll use the arome because it's high resolution. But you can see that doesn't necessarily make sense to the wind, and the reason for that is our ocean data. And so you see this madness of boxes here, and this is us just showing us high resolution areas. And obviously the reason that our routes are doing these things is the currents. And so I know I mentioned them before, but it'll do the same thing, flicking between high resolution current area and using them for in the routing. And I just think it's really important to understand what's going on here. And you can see, obviously, when we looked at that wind grid before, you'd just be sailing straight down, right? Your fastest angle with the wind. Obviously, with this current, the router wants you to do some tricky stuff and hug the coastline there. And it's just very cool to see that. And so how the router will work with the currents is it will use the predict wind high resolution tidal currents, so the 100-meter tidal currents. This is for your area here around the UK, and then it will flick over to the IBI model, and then once you get out of that IBI range, which I think is out here, it'll go into the ocean current modeling. So, but your short term, as Smiley said, either the start or the end of the race, having this stuff coming in here, this high resolution modeling, you probably know the general part of it, what's going in, it's going out, but being able to see it, being able to strategize over that stuff, I think is really critical. So it's all in there. It's all in the Gribs, and you can have this all downloaded. You can actually download this before you go. You see here, it says my Grib is 20 hours old. That's because in New Zealand time, it updated at midday yesterday, and it will update again in about 4 hours time. The one thing that I would take away from today would be thinking about your currents and using that modeling.
Thank you so much, Nick, and thank you, Smiley. That was a great overview of what PredictWind has to offer, and we've got so much more, on our website in our help center. Which brings me to something I just wanted to reiterate: is that our PredictWind app and the Offshore app you can use on all of your iOS, Android devices, tablets, your Mac, your PC. Go into our website, predictwind.com, have a look around and see which device suits your needs on board. Download the app, and then you can get straight into it. I also want to mention, just to avoid any confusion, that with your racing this year, the Royal Ocean Racing Club has made an amendment number 2, to their annual notice of race, which clarifies the permission of use of publicly available cloud-based weather routing. So go in and have a look. If you have any questions, by all means, reach out to us. On that next note, our help center, which is available on PredictWind website, on your PredictWind account, and also offline in the Offshore app when you're at sea. Tons of questions in there, mini tutorials, webinars. It's like having Nick or Smiley, at any question you've got, they can explain, or any of our support staff can help explain. Thanks again.